Hello, fellow adventurers. Thor here, and you might notice we are not in Colorado doing a 14er today. Instead, we are in the desert of California doing the highest mountain in the San Diego area, which belongs to an Indian reservation known as Los Coyotes. You do have to pay a fee to go ahead and be on this mountain, but I thought it would be an interesting topic to tackle a hike today that not only involves a desert environment as opposed to an alpine one, but some of the challenges, hurdles, and the different wildlife you'll see here. I mean, obviously, they have a mountain lion and rattlesnake warning, which you will run into in Colorado. But there's a lot more to see here than just those two. Along with that, we're going to try to see if we can find any of the hot springs. But without further ado, let's start hitting this trail.
Today, like I said, we are tackling Hot Springs Mountain, which is the tallest peak in San Diego at just over 6,500 feet, which on paper, it sounds like a solid climb. But when you stack it up against a Colorado 14er, which a lot of my channel, we cover that kind of content, those giants are over 14,000 feet tall, which means Hot Springs Mountain is basically a little cousin who still gets carded at the bar. But here's the thing, not every hike needs to be a death march into the clouds, and sometimes a mountain like this does have its own pros, cons, and charm, and that's kind of what I wanted to break down in the voiceover part. So right off the bat, one of the biggest differences is accessibility. A Colorado 14er often requires waking up at 2 or 3 a.m., driving into the middle of nowhere, and yeah, you're gonna do a sketchy dirt road in a beat up Subaru. I know there's some people out there that take their two-wheel drive Toyota Corolla. I don't recommend it. But yeah, you're gonna start your hike in freezing air before sunrise for the most part, and Hot Springs Mountain is very different. I just rolled up to the Los Coyotes reservation, I paid 10 bucks, and boom, I was on the trail. There were no snow boots required, no ice axe. The difference though is I can actually breathe while I do this one. There's no altitude headache, no lungs on fire, and there's no bargaining with the universe or my mental to just take another step. And it's a pretty easy overall hike to get to and enjoy. Now, let's talk about the difficulty. A 14er will humble you really quick. Doesn't matter which one you're doing. You got thin air, steep elevation gain, sometimes 4,000 to 5,000 feet of climbing in a single push if you're doing a really hard one. Every step above 12,000 feet, once you get past that tree line, it really does feel like your lungs are filing a complaint with HR. However, the hot springs, and don't get me wrong here, it is still a very solid workout. I was still looking at about 10 miles round trip and 2,000 feet of gain. This was very easy. If I were to compare it to a 14er, the most likely one is Sherman. However, this one is a little bit longer than Sherman.
All right, so we're about 2 miles into the hike, actually making pretty good time. There are some key differences I've already noted about doing this type of hike in California desert versus, well, the 14ers in alpine land. The first one is going to be at around 12,000 feet. If you're doing a 14er in Colorado, you'll notice the tree line disappears. Around me, though, you will notice the trees stay no matter what. And it makes it quite different. In the high altitude, when you reach past the tree line, the air is pretty cool due to how high you are. And there is a lot of exposure where you can get sunburned, but overall you don't overheat. Here, well, even though the tree line never ends, as you can see by the trail, you're not covered by any trees. You're constantly in the sun because most of the trees are just actually shrubs, and the temperature is much higher. The sun actually cooks you constantly, and it's much more humid. I don't know if you guys have seen in the GoPro footage, but I'm swatting flies left and right. Both are equally difficult, but in their own specific way. I don't actually know which one I prefer more. I think I actually prefer the 14er where you're up at a high altitude and you're cool at least, whereas here I just feel like I'm an easy bake oven, but we're gonna keep hitting this trail and make it to the top.
Now, scenery is another huge contrast. Colorado 14s are all about the alpines. You got a bunch of jagged ridge lines, snow fields that stick around all summer no matter what, and views so big when you get to the top, you can practically see your problem shrinking below you. However, if you notice here where I'm at Hot Springs Mountain, the vibe is completely different. You pretty much start in a chaparral and desert scrub, and then eventually we're going to be moving into a shady pine forest. And by the summit, you're looking out over the Pacific Ocean if you can actually get the view. It was a little cloudy when I did this today. And then you got the Anza Borongo Desert the other way. Probably horribly mispronounced that, by the way. It's less Everest training camp and more choose your own postcard. And another thing is, on a 14er, you're really trying to do a quick pace because you're dodging lightning storms before noon and timing your summit so you don't get fried.
That's a giant pine cone.
On On Hot Springs Mountain, though, the biggest weather hazard, and you can see this, is forgetting sunscreen and turning into a lobster. There is a post-video thing I'll probably do at some point. I got absolutely cooked on this thing. And unless it's in winter, in which case you might get a little snow, which San Diegans will probably immediately cancel work over. There's also some pretty cool cultural differences between these mountains. Most Colorado 14ers are on public forest land, so it's open access as long as you respect the trail. Hot Springs Mountain, though, is, like I said, on Lost Coyotes Reservation. So when you do hike here, you're stepping onto tribal land, which means paying your entry fee, following the rules, and getting to see a place that a lot of people don't even realize is open to the public. It's actually a pretty well hidden gem, and honestly, it feels a lot more personal. You'll hear me talk about it in a minute, but I didn't see anyone all day on this entire hike. On a 14er, I run into people no matter what time of the year at any point. This one was just completely barren. It was nice. I had the trail basically to myself.
All right, so we are nearing the top, and I've got to say, this has not been a difficult hike despite it being the tallest mountain in San Diego. It's overall a pretty easy hike. In fact, as you saw from the last couple minutes of footage, there is actually a bunch of trees, and some of the stuff here is absolutely massive. That pine cone that we found was one of the biggest pine cones I ever saw. If you saw the squirrel run across the screen a couple seconds ago, that thing was the biggest squirrel I ever saw. I don't know if it's due to an abundance of food or a lot of the natural resources on this mountain, because like its name implies, Hot Springs Mountain, well, this place is known for its hot springs. In fact, there was a bunch of resorts built in the early 1900s all over here. I have yet to see one, but I assume that they got taken out because, well, they just weren't as popular as LA and San Diego continue to get more infrastructure. But I'm really excited to get to the top of this one because apparently you can go ahead and see the ocean from up here, which is something we don't get to do on 14ers. Also, I really can't get over the fact about how many insects are here. The wildlife is great. It's much more diverse than I'd say on a 14er with just mostly mountain goats, pikas, and marmots. Over here, there's a lot of squirrels. The different types of birds is something that I'm not used to seeing nearly as much on a 14er. The insects, though, are absolutely killing me. These gnats and flies, they're just all over, and I kind of wish I was at a very high altitude, which is one of the benefits of 14ers. We don't really get a lot of insects up there, but let's go ahead and see about getting to the top of this mountain.
Now, the summit experience on a 14er finally topping out feels like a battle. You're pretty much exhausted. The wind is cutting through you. Your snacks at this point are probably frozen solid or melted. It really could go either way. And you're trying to take a selfie without your phone sliding off the ridge. But man, the views on a 14er are stunning. Worth it. Here on Hot Springs, the summit is way friendlier. There's an old fire tower you're going to see, some boulders to scramble on, and enough flat space to actually sit down and eat lunch without fearing gravity, which will make you its next victim. You can even just chill and enjoy the view instead of immediately running down just to beat the storm clouds, which is what I did. I laid on a big rock and just took a nap.
All right, so we made it to the top, and just like any other mountain, doesn't matter if it's a 14er or, you know, a 6,000, 7,000 foot mountain, it's absolutely gorgeous from the top, and it's a long way down. I will say this is a way easier hike than a 14er in almost every aspect. I don't think my heartbeat ever really got challenged, and if you've done a 14er, you're gonna absolutely smash this hike along with most other high mountains in other states. Another interesting thing I found about the mountain is that there was almost no one up here whatsoever. In 14er season in Colorado, at least, no matter what day I go, there's always someone I'll run into on the way up or on the way down. On the entire time here, I did not see another human being. There wasn't another car parked in the parking lot to the trailhead. It was just a really interesting hike and very self-meditative, if that makes sense. You get a lot of time to yourself to just think and just kind of enjoy the nature. And I think that actually makes it, in a sense, a little bit more enjoyable than a 14er. The challenge of a 14er is what makes it amazing, but you deal with a lot of other people and stuff on the mountain. Here, you're just hiking, enjoying the scenery and the very, very annoying flies. But that's gonna be today's hike. It was a very mellow one. Like I said, I'm on vacation. I just thought I'd knock one out when I'm not in Colorado. But until next time, everyone, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you on the next adventure.